Thank you, Brian, for joining in. Thank you, Vanessa, for joining in. Thank you, Jonita, for joining in. Thank you, Felix, for joining in. Thank you, Bruno. Thank you, Ambalan, for joining in. Thank you, Napoleon, for joining in. Good morning from Houston. Thank you, Grace, for joining in. Thank you, Susan, for joining in. Thank you, Gabriel, for joining in. Thank you, Mr. Gerard, for joining in. Thank you, Blondie, for joining in. If you just tune in, here again, my name is Funton Daniel. I will be speaking live here from the great state of Texas. And if you just join in, there's a lot of discussion that we will be talking about. And if you have the opportunity, please could you share? And I want to take a moment to thank all of you for joining in. I will be broadcasting on my Facebook and live on my YouTube. So either way, you should be able to get me live. Thank you, Amon, for joining in. Thank you, Crockett, for joining in. I will be broadcasting live here from the great state of Texas, here in the United States. And if you just tune in, I'm also live on my Facebook. Thank you, Bob, for joining in. And I'll also be live on my YouTube as well. So either way, you should be able to get me live. I want to take a moment to thank all of you for tuning in. Here again, my name is Funton Daniel. I will be speaking live from the great state of Texas here in the United States. And for my fellow brothers in Ground Zero, those in La Republique, those across the hemisphere of this world we live in. Here again, I will be broadcast live on my YouTube, Facebook. So either way, you should be able to get me live. Here again, my name is Funton Daniel from the great state of Texas here in the United States. There is a lot of things that we have to talk about, and I want to thank all of you for tuning in again. And please could you share, and that is the way we can get information across. Are you excited this morning? Because I know we all are in sympathy because of the destruction that is currently going on in the Southern Cameroon territory, now the Federal Republic of Ambazonian, which we shall be talking more about it. But however, health-wise, I hope you all are in good health. You know, we will soon heading towards the winter season for us in this area. Make sure you get yourself vaccinated. Vaccinations or the flu season, we're heading towards the flu season. Make sure you get yourself protected or boost your immune system against this flu epidemic or pandemic or whatever, depending on where you are. So make sure you get yourself vaccinated or flu shot, whatever you do to boost your immune system against the strains of this bacteria. So whatever, if you're here in the United States, if you're here in the entire continental state of the United States, I want to take a moment to thank all of you for tuning in. Again, I am broadcasting live on my YouTube and my Facebook. So if you just join us, share the information, and then we will proceed in a moment. And I want to take a moment to thank all of you for joining me live this morning. Hey, anyway, what's going on? What's going on? Okay, my name is Funton Daniel again. I was just speaking live from this great state. It's amazing being here in this wonderful nation, the United States. It's the most admired, the best nation that you can be proud of. And I can't be else somewhere else. But unfortunately, we are blessed to be in this country. It's a country that the law supersedes. You know, it's a law that look at all human. You may have some skimmish which is a human nature, but I don't want you can classify the law of these nations that make exceptionally difference as compared to any other part of the world. I know you can appreciate wherever you are, but I will always stand for the United States, not because, but because of the beauty of the law that governs this country. It makes it accessible to everyone so that all of us are well protected. There may be a time that some individual exceptionally do something that is out of extraordinary, but it will be subject to the law of these great nations. And that is the beauty of these great nations as compared to the rest of the other nations on earth. But however, I want to thank the president of this country. I want to thank the United States Congress. I want to thank the United States Senate. I want to thank the U.S. Permanent Representative to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. I want to thank U.S. Department of Defense. I want to thank U.S. State Department. And I want to thank the White House. But however, we have a draconic problems in the Southern Cameroon territory. But before I dive into that, I want to give a brief synopsis on these issues. Can you imagine that a prime minister of the neighboring country, La Republic, and he happened to be the son of Ambazonian? He is called Philemon Yang. You all are aware, it's a certain individual that is somewhere from the Ambazonia. One time, someone that has been an ambassador to Canada. One will expect him to make a better judgment. Of course, being in an advanced country, your perception, your mental judgment, the way you reason is potentially different as compared to those that haven't been exposed to the advanced world. Haven't been an ambassador for almost 20 years in Canada. One will expect him to be more self-disciplined. Imagine a prime minister whose vehicle or convoy hit a child and the child happened to die. And imagine that he removed 30,000 francs CFA and gave to that family. That is absolutely disgusting. for a prime minister removing 30,000 francs and giving to a family that amount of 30,000 francs cannot even give it to a child breakfast. That amount cannot even give it to a... I mean, it is absolutely disgusting when a prime minister remove 30,000 francs to give to a family whose his convoy being destroyed or killed that child. And what is 30,000 francs? For those who are not familiar with the CFA, 30,000 francs is probably approximately $53 to $54. That is a family, that is the child of a decent family that was hit by La République, and that convoy was headed by Philemon Yang, and he removed 30,000 francs, which is amount to about $53 to $54, and given to a family. What a disgust! Even if the local community will not remove $53 to give to the family, because that absolutely cannot even price a single item, even to remove the cup from where it was eaten and take it to their home, it costs more than 30,000 francs. Then you can imagine that a person of that level that has been in here in Europe, in the Western Hemisphere, and will do such a thing and remove 30,000 francs. That is pathetic. But anyway, that is what is happening. Then let's move to another problem, the Zambia. You know, we talk about colonialism. We've been preaching this gospel for a long time. We've been preaching about colonialism. Colonialism is when one of a super nations takes over another nation's their general economic system for their own self-egoistic means. And that is exactly, we all talk about colonialism, but yet they still proceed that colonialism is no longer going away. We all are aware of the history and factual information what happened to colonialism. When the United Nations denounced colonialism, the United Nations said all those territories that were taken over after the 1945 should be given a priority independence, and that led to many African territories that gained their own independence. But today, there is a new advent of colonialism that began with China. It is important that when we talk about the Western society, it is important that because they have some degree of law, that law at some times hold them accountable. But when you find a communist government that is not accountable to no single individual, but to a single individual, the entire population of Chinese is accountable to a single individual. No one can question and immediately will be succumbed to the life, death, and execution. And that is the communist system. And today is the dark days of the people of Zambia. The people of Zambia have witnessed a takeover of the entire government by a Chinese company, including the police force. While the rest of Africa are indirectly controlled by the French authority, like they don't physically have them supervised, but they are indirectly controlled. And in some degree, they have some independence to control those aspects. For example, the gendarmerie that is so occupied the entire French Africa is typically financed and funded by the French authority. And that has been the symbol of brutality in those French colonies. The gendarmerie, maybe if many people are not aware of. The gendarmerie is controlled and so controlled by the French government. And that is why they are in the panel of every aspect of human in West Africa, especially those colonies of Africa that happen to have a relationship with the French government. But today you find the Chinese government taking over the entire Zambia police force. I am not against that any other person cannot become citizen or police force in any country. They should provide opportunity for any individual. But we find entire nations being taken over by the entire police force. It is a serious concern. Why the lunatic that are in Zambia, they call the Zambian government. The Zambian government is led by a lunatic that they are not aware of this future, the people's future. But they see their momentary concern and that of their own personal interest, but looking at Zambia as a whole. While we speak about this colonialism, there are certain lunatics within the Zambia central government that are incoherent and lack of vision for the government and lack of vision for the country. And that is why they import Chinese to take over. You all have seen the videos that have shown how the Chinese have been insulting Africans. And they have to be deported back. And the problem is when you have a government that has no rule of law, that government that law is not abiding to the people, especially the Chinese descent. The China government is not accountable to any individual except the brutal president. And today, Zambia has returned back to the 19th century. The problem is because there is no visions. There is no visionary ideas. People are being appointed to the takeover positions that they have no visionary ideas in how they're going to execute it. But for example, if you appoint your cousin to lead, and that cousin has no visionary ideas, principles to lead, there is probability that it's going to crumble. And that is how the government-owned agency crumble, because they are being managed by cousins and distant relatives. And those distant relatives has no mental focus, has no business ideas, has no visionary in how they are going to implement them. They just come there by default and with mental challenges, and they are in a crumble state. And that is why the Zambia cannot accept that they are being taken over by the Chinese government. Imagine you have a police force that is being controlled by the Chinese government. Guess what will happen? The Chinese government is going to fund that particular police that is headed by the Chinese citizens. And eventually they're going to be brutalize the citizens of that particular nature. And so the dark days of Zambia has just begun with the takeover of Chinese. What the Zambia can do is to conduct a new fresh election and allow an open, transparent election. Allow the smartest and individual to participate in a government of transparency. Allow the smartest individuals that has the goal and the vision, and without control the aspect of who should be the candidate. Allow an open, transparent government. And a transparent government will bring visionary ideas, and those visionary ideas will be put into practice. And when those visionary ideas will be put into practice, it will transform the Zambia to a new era of the world century. But because we choose an individual because of our personal relationship to that particular individual, rather than his visionary ideas that he will transform the country to a new, different era. And so this has led to a chaotic scene in which we are seeing across African territory. The leaders do not have no vision. They have no vision. Vision is when you have a vision and you look forward and you see how you're going to implement those visions So you have to have an ideas, and those ideas you need to visualize, and you need to have a platform, and you need to have a time frame. And when you have those time frame, then you will be ready to act upon those visual ideas. And there must be an accountability whether those visions are feasible to get a good outcome. But we have a leader that lack this visionary. But because they choose cousins, distant relatives, and cousins, and this, and those has no principal business oriented. And that is why Africa is crumbling. Africa is crumbling. Africa has not advanced despite the fact that in the advent of technology, Africa is still dragging behind. And that is why Zambia, just entire corporation, the energy is taken by China. The entire police force is taken by China. What an amicable disgrace to the Zambian. The dark days is still ahead for the people of Zambia. Either this government of Zambia discard itself and allow the new fresh election that they have people with visionary ideas to transform the country to a new economic era. Then China will convert it to the Chinese language country. But however, the Africa, you have something to talk about. But anyway, let's return back to the people of Ambazonia. Today is the darkest day. You see, when I speak and I have a problem, the problem is that of the French. The French has a draconic way of holding on to the entire frame of Africa, that the natural air is difficult to even exhale. Africa has difficulty to inhale and exhale the natural air because they are being draconically held by the French authority. And that is why the stress of the people descend. And the people of Ambazonian will not be a part of this. Our people in the Southern Cameroon territory, now the Federal Republic of Ambazonian, are brutally murdered each day, are slaughtered each day. And yet, because the certain actors that control every aspect of African descent, our people are being murdered. The people of Ambazonia are being murdered each day. They are being murdered each day. Not because they choose to, but because we have a people that we invited to our home. We invite a terrorist government to our home. Be conscious whom you invite to your home, because we are suffering this period of draconic because we invite La Republique into our home. We invite La Republique into our home. They had just consumed our home, and now they are slaughtering our home. Remember, in the 50s or in the 60s, the Southern Cameroon had their own police force. The police force enjoyed the peace and tranquility. They maintained exactly peace for the people of Southern Cameroon territory, now the Federal Republic of Ambazonian. But today our police force has been discarded, and now we have an agony of breeding. Now we have an agony of breeding. We have an agony of breeding because we have a terrorist government of the neighboring country, La Republique du Cameroon, that is constantly murdering and slaughtering our people and in entire the Southern Cameroon territory. Remember Article 1608XV of the United Nations Charter, 1960, at 3 p.m. here in New York, voted recognizing the independence of our people. But yet we find our people being slaughtered each day. And despite the fact that we communicate, we explain and we talk, the world remains adamantly silent because they don't care about it. They are more concerned of the mineral resources. Today, we have someone called Paul Biya of the neighboring country, La Republique. This guy is a mentally challenged individual, Paul Biya. He's 86 years old. He's mentally deranged. I can borrow from advanced pathophysiology. I can borrow from the advanced pathophysiology of my claims. He said people with former thought disorder. McLean's in his advanced pathophysiology of disease, he said people with former thought. People with former thought, they, according to them, according to McLean's, they may be fluent in speech, but the speech is loosely association. The speech has loose association. So if the people with informal thought disorder, with people with informal thought disorder, they may have fluent in speech, but the speech may have loose dissociation. But this is the leadership that is governing La Republique. We have someone at the helm of an enterprise, of a government, Paul Biya, that is mentally incapacitated, but he has a certain surrounding. This is because we have a cultural problem. We have a cultural mentality within the African context, and that we assume that a certain individual by default is a leadership, and that is the leadership crisis we are having in Africa. We have someone with mentally deranged. Paul Biya, he's 86 years old. He can't even remember his daughter. He can't even remember the wife. He can't even remember his environment. But he has a surrounding that is secure by a terrorist military, including what is so-called the general. Because the world support him. The world believe in him. The world knew he is the Messiah of Africa. And today, our people are being slaughtered. Young generation that's supposed to build Africa are now being dismantled and murdered at will because we have a terrorist military that lacks vision, lacks goal, and has the mentally deranged capacity. And today, the people of Ambazonian are slaughtering each day as I'm speaking. But we have someone at the helm of a government, a helm with mentally deranged, called Paul Biya, 86 years old. But today he's still standing as the president of the same because we have a French government that provides all the necessary military weapons to ensure that his position is maintained. We are in an era of disgusting world, the world that one will expect to have a quiet and peaceful world, but unfortunately, we have the world that has sinned in a different dissolutions. People with mentally problems may be deranged, maybe have poor behavioral skills, they may be deranged, their thought process, they may look aloof, they may be their affect may look disgruntled. You will understand with me that that is the person that the world recognizes as the person of a legitimate right, and that the world will not denounce it so long as French government support, and we will all have to accept. And that is the nightmare that the world will think is an efficient and place that one will expect their life to be more open and transparent for people to live and appreciate. But unfortunately, so long as you have the weaponry, and that is what France is doing. France, through the French ambassador in La Republique, is supplying all the weaponry, all the arsenal, all the telescopic, and to be used in Southern Cameroon territory and murdering our citizens, our people. France and China are providing advanced arsenal that are being used in the Southern Cameroon territory and murdering our people. And yet, that is the world we choose to live in. That is the world we deviate from the truth fact and choose the wrong fact, so long as it's for our own personal interest, rather than the peace and coherent world. And today, La République is destroying our motherland, our land of our birth. France is constantly supplying all the weapons that is needed. France is constantly supplying all the necessary telescopic and all advanced equipment to this terrorist individual that is suffering from former mental disorder to destabilize and destroy our peace-loving people. Imagine, we will expect the Great Britain to intervene despite the coherent relationship that we have. I am speaking this language because I thought there was a country that came to Africa and introduced English language. And today I am sharing the same language like any other part that belongs to the British colony. But today Britain has isolated itself and choose girls through the Common Secretary and the British ambassador to La République. And our people are being slaughtered, but British is more interested. British is more interested of the natural gas rather than the indigenous people. And that is why France is using all the available arsenal, advanced camera, and supply to the military of this brutal dictatorship that is mentally deranged. That is mentally deranged. That is mentally deranged. And each day when you get up, you look at you see your people being slaughtered. You see your people being killed. And that is a constant day in and day out. We have Chinese. We have China that is supplying this brutal dictatorship. Pobia, all the necessary advanced camera, advanced technology that is used to locate our children, our brothers, our sisters, our uncles, our distant relatives. And now they are being slaughtered each day, each out. But the fact is clear that La République is not Southern Cameroon. La République is a French colonial territory, and Southern Cameroon is a British colonial territory. And yet, one would expect immediate suspension of the La République in the Commonwealth of Nations, because it is because of the people of Southern Cameroon that the Commonwealth of Nations admitted La République. And so the same people have stood up and said no to La République, and yet the Commonwealth of Nations is still endorsing La République, a French colony, and while the slaughtering, it continues. This is the world we are living in. It is absolutely painful when you see the world that we expect them to be more cautious and judicially judging reality from factual, judging friction from... But unfortunately, no one sees it as a matter of urgency. No one sees this as a matter of urgency. When you see a leader, a president, someone they call Pope, that is suffering from mental problems, but unfortunately, is someone that is mentally deranged. His mentally functions cannot, but because we have this tendency of Africa cultural heritage, and because of the cultural heritage in which they accept individual, they don't evaluate whether the mental capability of that set individual. But because by default they happen to be parents, we just by default accept their factual without even validate whether is it valid or is it the conscious mind. Is it within the standard? Does he speak coherent? Does he understand what he is saying? Can we validate? But unfortunately, the world has endorsed it. And so obviously, we should by default endorse it as well. And if I go back to MacLean's advanced pathophysiology, he says they call allogia. And Logan is a person who lacks spontaneous concern for the general public. He lacks the spontaneous concern for the general public. And that is why when the people are being slaughtered in the Southern Cameroon territory, he can't call for overhaul because he's mentally deranged. But since he's mentally deranged, simply the people are asking a simple reform. Reform a government that is accountable, a government that the people can trust, a government that the people can elect, a government that takes responsibility of its act against its citizens. But a government that is led by a deranged individual has no mental function capability to be able to distinguish between right or wrong. And so certain individuals should be in a confined institution. Pobia should have been in a confined institution because of the mental capability to make sound judgment. He's been surrounded by a group of individuals that lack moral judgment to make sound value that is valid. That is La République. La République is surrounded by a group of individuals that lack mental capability to evaluate whether the constant individual called Pobia is capable to make a meaningful judgment. But by default, with the cultural heritage of Africa, they just assume he is capable. But unfortunately, the people of Southern Cameroon become the slaughtering house. The people of Southern Cameroon become the slaughtering house. Give me a minute, I'll be back. What is the people of Southern Cameroon requesting? They request a meaningful dialogue, a meaningful where we have a roundtable discussion that we discuss about what is our relationship with La République. That is a simple. But they want to use a repressive military because the French government persuaded this terrorist government not to yield to the Anglophone because of their knowledge and their skill, their experience, and how they are very intelligent. But unfortunately, we are asking a simple roundtable, and even the world body has called for a roundtable. But the mentally deranged that is suffering from psychosis, Pobia, he's suffering from mental deranged, he's suffering from psychosis, he lacks judgment, but he's surrendered by his own village clique. And he has been surrounded by a military that is purely from his own rural area, whom he appointed to protect him and the people of Southern Cameroon, and now being murdered, become the slaughtering house. And yet, we have been screaming, we have been shouting, we have been calling for but the world order remains silent. The world order remains silent. The world order remains silent. And the murdering continues. The murdering continues. We all know, I will expect that the world community will understand. I will expect the British government to call for an order, despite the fact that this matter has been presented to the British Parliament under the current Prime Minister Theresa May, has been debated in the Parliament, but they haven't issued a communique. They're asking someone 86 years old that is suffering from psychosis, and someone with 86 years old suffering from psychosis to come for a dialogue. I will expect Britain to understand, based on research and technology, based on medical evaluation, based on psychiatry evaluation, based on educational in Britain, they should be able to understand that this said individual suffering from psychosis, who is 86 years old, has no mental judgment, but he's been surrendered by a military that France is implanted, and not to yield to the call of the majority of the people that they want a meaningful reform. I would expect the British Prime Minister to stood up and kick against, but unfortunately, the British Prime Minister ignored everything. Of course, so long as that Africa becomes the slaughtering house, it doesn't matter to the British government. It doesn't matter. I can expect the United States Department of Defense to pull out of the Southern Cameroon, to pull out from La Republique, showing their support and concern. And the U.S. ambassador has actually verbally talked about it and traveled there. But unfortunately, the British ambassador remained adamantly silent as though nothing is happening. That is the British government that we expect to kick against. But unfortunately, the British government are more concerned with the natural gas of 1.5 billion US dollar. That they are more concerned. They will provide military equipment to this terrorist government of mentally deranged individual called Pobia. That is the priority of the British people, British government. That is the priority of the British government. The priority of the British government, they are more concerned with the 1.5 billion US dollar natural gas that we're going to provide weaponry to this terrorist government of La Republique. And that is why China is ready to supply all those military equipment. They have already begun supplying those equipment. China has already benefited. China is the beneficiary of the contract agreement signed between British government of 1.5 billion of natural gas exploration in the Southern Cameroon territory, while the citizens are languishing in the forest. They are being slaughtered like time bomb. This is the world we live in. The world of reality. The world of reality. That's the world of reality that we currently live on. This is the problem of the French system. You know why? When the people elect their own leadership, and that particular government is accountable to the people whom they elect. And so in contrast to La République, under the French administrative system, they appoint individuals, give every military weaponry, and to make sure that the people are being suppressed. They make sure that the people are being executed. They make sure that every draconic laws are implemented and make the environment more hazard for the people, for the indigents. And that is why they have the right, they have the audacity, and tell the world how Africa is backward. It's because of their draconic policy. Imagine United States government provide loan to La République. France will first of all have to validate that amount of money to be sent to Africa. Why? If the United States is sending money to Africa, France has to validate before. Whereas France is a nation on its own, and Africa has a countries. And those countries in Africa will have to wait for France validation and decide how much amount should be sent to Africa. And yet they claim Africa because, one, the leadership. One, they use their military weapon and suppress those who stood for freedom. I want to take a moment to thank all of you for watching. I wish you all a happy day.